Many thanks for joining us, dear viewers. This is Future Africa. I'm Kawan the mobile hosting this program. Have a beautiful time. Today, I'm joined by one guest from Zoom meeting from United States of America, and her name is Mamay Worku. She's a public diplomacy network chairperson in Denver, Colorado, United States of America. Many thanks for joining us and welcome to this program, Mamay.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's great to be here.
Okay, just to begin with, who is Mama? Please introduce yourself in short.
So my name is Mamay Worku. I do live in Denver, Colorado. Been here for quite some time. By daytime, I work for City and County of Denver. I also get to work with the Ethiopian Public Diplomacy Network Group, the West Coast side of the states here. So about 11 chapters we have here, and we do a lot of work there. So right now I'm chairing or I'm leading that work.
Good. Today we'll mostly discuss about the current situation of this country, Ethiopia. And just to begin with, how are you following the current situation and the developments in Ethiopia?
From the beginning, from the onset of this conflict, we have been following the situation since a year ago. And from that one time, we all got together and talked about what all was happening. We have been following the situation here and back in Ethiopia as much as we can very closely. I'm not saying I know everything, but I know what I know, and we've been really in it for a long time. So it's not like we may not be there, but it's not that we don't know. To the degree possible, we do. We've been involved in so many different ways, whether it's in public diplomacy, speaking with officials, holding town hall meetings, trying to change the narrative in so many different ways, and also getting the information, the right information, and putting it out to the community here. So we've been pretty much involved in so many different ways.
Well, in the last weekend, many or thousands of Ethiopians and others Africans took on the streets of 27 cities across 5 continents, denouncing the Western interference into the very domestic affair of this country. What was the main message of the rally?
So I guess the main message really, it has more than one, but it really is saying no more, and then no more to the lies, no more the fake news, no more the false narrative, no more to pressurizing the Ethiopian government for no, I guess, without necessarily the right basis, without getting the facts, and without this side of the world being willing to listen to the facts and the true stories. It also had a sentiment of Pan-Africanism. It brought out a lot of people, not just Ethiopians. The Eritrean community was with us, hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder. African Americans were there, and then Africans also were there. So it did have a sentiment of Pan-Africanism. It really was a national, global, but nationalistic kind of sentiment. And it brought a lot of people out together. It was very powerful.
Many political analysts are describing the event or the demonstration event as the first moment that brought Africans' voice together in recent history. What do you think that these African of these sides raised their voice under the hashtag no more slogan?
So I think the reason why the hashtag no more slogan or movement brought a lot of us together, and it is a true statement. We've been out in various rallies before, but we've not seen one like this one. It's not just the number of places that happened, it's how many people that came out. And it also the sentiment the people had behind it, the messaging, the strength, and the nationalism that people showed really was pretty strong, and it was evident. I think the reason why, and I think the timing is one thing. I think it was time. Everybody was just done. It really is just saying no more. We have been quiet for quite a bit. We've tried to do different things and put out our messages in so many different ways, but when ignored, I guess people took it out to the streets. The timing was right. The timing was ripe. People were ready to say no more. They were just not willing to sit back and be pressured. We're not willing to sit back and not be heard. We're not just willing to just sit back and not do anything about it, and allow the lies to continue and the false narrative to continue, and watch the false narrative causing a lot of unnecessary, especially economic pressure onto the government. The hashtag no more movement or that sentiment, I guess, resonates with a lot of people. It didn't have to be an Ethiopian. I think for a lot of people, for African Americans, for Africans, for all of us, it brought us to that common ground.
The US has called on its citizens for the fifth time to evacuate citizens from Ethiopia as soon as possible and claiming for security risks in this country. Why do you think that the US government would want citizens to leave Ethiopia this fast?
So giving them the benefit of the doubt, initially, I would say it could be because they just want to be cautious and they're wanting to avoid the same error that has occurred during the Afghan evacuation. They know that there were some errors that were made that did not look good for them at all. I guess some Americans were left behind when they were evacuating Afghans first, and that was just not a good policy for them at all. So initially, what I want to say is maybe they're just being cautious. But with that said, though, there is no need for them to be cautious about. Afghan situation is different. And in the background, the statement that we hear related to them pulling their people out of the country is because, well, in case or if or when TPLF makes it to Addis Ababa, there's going to be some chaos happening. Well, if they knew that there was no way TPLF was going to step a foot in Addis Ababa, then they wouldn't necessarily say that. But then it's their notion, it's their understanding, it's their anticipation. Whether they believe it or not, whether they have any facts at all, it's on them. It would have been a better communication for them to say, we just want to be cautious. We want to make sure that, while the commercial flights are still available, we want our people to come up because we may not be able to do what we usually are able to do because, yes, their resources have been expended elsewhere. I think that would have been a better communication versus saying, well, when TPLF gets into Addis Ababa, we just don't want to we don't want to be there. The fact is, there is no such thing. TPLF isn't going to arrive in Addis Ababa, we're just going to sit around and wait and let it happen. That, to me, that's the extent of them being uninformed. I don't have any fear or I don't have any notion to believe otherwise, that, that the fear that they have right now would happen in Addis Ababa. I doubt that that's the case, but that's how far removed they are from the fact to even, put out a statement like that to say, when this happens, then this is just emboldening TPLF without any basis. So, like I said, giving them the benefit of the doubt could be just being cautious, but then they're also sending some kind of covert message behind it. Whether they meant to do it or it's just coming out of them because of fear, we don't know. I don't know. It could be politics. I have no way of explaining why they would even have that kind of notion. We know for sure, we've heard some Americans in Ethiopia saying, we're not planning on leaving. We have heard some sentiments and some statements also from Americans that live in Ethiopia that said, we don't see that happening here. Addis Ababa is as peaceful as it could be. We don't have any fear and we are not leaving. They're sending messages to them. It is inciting some kind of fear, I think, in the people. And I think that's their way of also putting pressure on the government. I think that's another way of saying, if you don't do this, then, or, if the US is pulling from Ethiopia, that means it must be really, really bad. So everybody else also wants to pull out, and then all of a sudden Ethiopia is going to feel some type of way. I think there is a little bit of political agenda into it. But like I said, face value could be just being cautious, or it could be something more than that. But I don't know what facts they have to even base that kind of statement on.
Well, nowadays the US government is calling to its aid organizations operating in this country, Ethiopia, to seize any humanitarian aid service and leave the country as soon as possible. Do you think this is also part of the economically punishing the Abiy Ahmed's government?
I don't know if it's punishing, but yeah, putting pressure on. Absolutely. They're trying to break this government to submission. I'm not sure they understand the strength of an African people, but that's what it is. So, we've seen it before. Other African countries have done it before. Even TPLF, when they were in power for the last 27 years, they they were the yes ma'am people. They took the money and they let anything and everything that needed to happen. And that's how come everybody had a hand in whatever it is that they think they had. But now somebody's saying no more, and then that becomes an issue. It is another way of pressuring the government into submission. I I don't know anything else to say, because now is not for anybody to take away support, because now is when Ethiopia needs the humanitarian support, the economic support, anything and everything that needs to be given to the country. Now would be the one. If they really cared about the people and the peace and what happens to Africa, then they wouldn't cause, they would not be part of the problem. They would be part of the solution. And the solution is not taking away resources. It's not taking away funding from the country.
Do you think the continued pressure from Western countries and their allied will force Ethiopia to surrender?
No. In short, no. We've seen it. I mean, we know who we are. We know what we do. I don't want to sound like we're being just plain stubborn. Surrender is a very strong statement. What are we surrendering to? Surrender means we give up. You surrender something. You just don't surrender. When you surrender, there is something to be given up. What are we giving up? I think if we stand on the fact and we started this path knowing and believing that we're on the right path, I'm not sure what is there to surrender. Whether or not we're going to give in to the pressure, we all have a hand in that. If we're saying, as much as we're saying right now, no, then we need to back it up with in any way we can, because maybe they will continue pressuring, and maybe they will continue to take away, and they will continue to bully this current administration to saying, okay, all right, enough already, here, this is what you want. We're not children. This isn't a toy. We're not talking about some merchandise that they're threatening to take away. This is the integrity and the sovereignty of the country that they're talking about. And I doubt that would be easy to surrender just like that. And after 27 years of nightmare, I think that is not a choice.
Many political analysts and commentators are nowadays saying that Ethiopia is fighting the African war, the African battle. What does that mean for you? And do you agree with this point?
I do agree. Ethiopia is fighting the African war. And what it means to me is, it's been said for the last however many years, Ethiopia is the gateway into the new era. Ethiopia has the cutting edge of technology. It's getting there. We've been working towards economic development. We've been working towards developing the country itself and standing on our own 2 feet and not necessarily depend on others, right? And if you think about it geographically, think about it agriculture, think about it industries, with China, with India, exchange, export and import, economic, so many different ways. And even politically, Ethiopia is positioned in the most amazing place, just naturally. GERD is one thing. Look what GERD just did. That is our ticket out of poverty. And we've been deprived of that for such a long time. So by continuing to say no to Ethiopia from growing, it's keeping the continent of Africa in poverty. Because Ethiopia, let's just take the example of GERD. With that power, with that actually being able to do what it set out to do, not only our own people, but our neighboring countries will be buying power from us a lot more cheaper than anywhere else. Ethiopia is becoming a reason for others also to come out of poverty. We are saying, okay, so we're done putting out our hands. We don't want to live like that. We can make it happen for ourselves. We want to be independent. And like I said, by preventing that from happening, Ethiopia is, then Africa is being said no to. And if not Ethiopia, then who? Why not Ethiopia? And today is Ethiopia, tomorrow is Kenya, and then some other countries. And Ethiopia is really fighting an African war in so many different ways. And I think the continent is waking up to that.
Why the African leaders and African continent in general failed to stop this continuous trend of the Western intervention into their country's matter, and for how long this trend will continue?
Well, I don't know if it's failing. I think it's delaying. And from what I could see, I think one of the reasons could be because as a continent, we haven't really come together. We haven't started working towards that. We did have some kind of government for the last 3 decades that did not want anything like that to happen because they were completely consumed with their own agenda. All they needed to do and all they wanted to do was develop their thing and nothing else. So that agenda was not promoted. That work has never happened. And all of a sudden now we're like facing it, and I think we're recognizing it. Whether or not I can say the continent or the neighboring African countries are quick enough to come together, maybe not. But it's starting. I think the movement is beginning. The awakening is there. We hear African countries saying, we're joining Africa. The whole hashtag no more thing, it caught on like fire. I don't know if we had failed, but I think the continent is lagging and it just needs to come together, find that commonalities and come together sooner than later.
Get the current leadership of the United States of America, the Biden administration is officially supporting the terrorist TPLF in Ethiopia, which is threatening to overthrow the current government of Ethiopia, legitimate government of Ethiopia, and threatening on different economic sanctions. Do you think this is fair?
Let me start out by saying, no, it's not fair. I don't know if they came right out and said, we're going to overthrow the government, but somehow inaction is also action, correct? So by not necessarily supporting the current government that is legitimately elected, democratically elected government, and putting so much pressure on it, it can be perceived as that, but I don't know if they literally went out to say we're going to overthrow. But the fact that they're pushing TPLF and emboldening TPLF in one way or another, it does look like it has the appearance of that. In just the last 24 hours, I guess they're going out there and saying, oh, we're not trying to support TPLF. If anything else, TPLF isn't going to be accepted ever in anywhere in not only in Ethiopia, anywhere in Africa. TPLF is not going to have any kind of existence because of what has happened and the kind of outlook that they have now. Did it happen right away? It didn't. It took a lot of work. It took a lot of, we've lost a lot of lives before we even got here. I think even Biden's administration is finally coming to that and saying, Ethiopians are not just going to take TPLF back. Look what's going on. Global outcry, and watching Ethiopians also come out in thousands in support of the military action right now and saying no to TPLF. And, it's been, like I said, a little bit over a year since we've been immersed in this work, and we've talked to a lot of officials here. And at every juncture, they said, well, if this didn't happen, if that didn't happen, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, that's going to just compromise the situation, it's going to make it worse. None of that happened. None of their fear actually materialized, except every single thing that we were saying, not because we were right. I don't mean we, but the fact itself actually surfaced and stood, and there isn't anything they can do about it. They were worried about the election. The election happened without a hitch. There were so many things that they were raising, and for all that, the investigation report that came out recently actually put a light on a lot of things. I think, if anything else, they're having to take some of their own statements back. If it wasn't for the State Department over and over, so many different times, putting out a statement that says we're deeply concerned. We're deeply concerned. Abiy's administration needs to do this. Abiy's administration needs to do that. The Ethiopian government, this, that, and the other. If it wasn't for that, TPLF would not have been emboldened this much. They took that as a fuel and they run with it, because somebody like the current government here, Biden's administration, putting out statement about Ethiopia, about Abiy's administration, the current administration, but not a single statement about them, gave them the indication or the notion that they were in support of them. They didn't see it that way. Now they're saying, well, we may not have said that, but it's not because we supported TPLF. Well, it's a little late and a dollar short. There isn't anything we can do about it. But to this day, even now, even if they're saying, well, they're not in support of TPLF, there is not an official statement that came out of the State Department that says the Biden administration does not support what TPLF is doing. TPLF needs to put down their arms. TPLF needs to abide by the ceasefire. TPLF, nothing. I have not heard anything that came out of this government, this administration. So that's the issue. I mean, it's open for interpretation, correct? If you just continue to, I don't know, attack is the right word, but if you continue to pressure only one side, that one side is going to feel like you know they're being picked on, they're being pressured, and then the other side is going to feel like, oh yeah, you know, we're right. Let's just continue to do what it is that we're doing, and that's just not right.
The U.S. also extended this sanction or economic sanction on the neighboring country of us, which is Eritrea, and also in connection with the conflict in the northern part of Ethiopia, Tigray regional state. And do you think the U.S. is working to stop the growing relationship between Ethiopia and Eritrea, as well as the Horn of African countries?
From what they're saying in the statements that they're putting out, no, they are not trying to sever a relationship with Ethiopia, Eritrea, or any African countries. But like I said, action speaks louder than words. They're not necessarily claiming to say that we don't care about the relationship. Ethiopia has or had an amazing relationship with the US, but lasted 118 years. I mean, that is pretty long. None of us were here when Ethiopia started having some kind of relationship with this country, right? That is something to be said. As far as I can say, the last however months we've been involved in this work, they're not necessarily saying they don't care to savor relationship. I don't think Ethiopia has said that either. What we're saying is, as much as they would like for their interests and their policies to be abide by, we're also saying, well, Ethiopia has an interest, has a policy, and that needs to be also respected, right? Ethiopia is a sovereign country, just like this country is a sovereign country. Every one of us as a sovereign person. The country by itself is not sovereign. What makes it sovereign is the people in it. So when you take away the sovereignty from the country, you're taking away the sovereignty from the people. But to your question, I think it's a tool that they're using. It's almost like being big brother, like being that I have what you want. If you don't do what I want you to do, I'm gonna take that away from you. That's another, I think, political tool that they're using. But even this shall come to pass. Ethiopia will prevail this, and Ethiopia will grow, and Ethiopia and the continent will not necessarily continue to depend on hand-me-down. Then at that point, there is a discussion to be had, I think, about what the foreign policy should look like between Ethiopia and the Western, especially this country, what kind of relationship can be fostered after that. I doubt that Ethiopia is ready to sever a relationship, but as of right now, we're just not gonna do this and say, hey, you're the big people, you're it, you've got whatever it is they think they have, and we're just gonna give you what you want. I don't think that's where Ethiopia is either. So it's a history to be unfolded.
Yet, as we said earlier, if Ethiopia is fighting the Africa's war, if Ethiopia is fighting the Africa's battle, why the rest of the African countries and their leadership are failed to show solidarity with Ethiopia? And for the future, what should be the way forward for Africa?
I think I talked about the why. I think it's because we've never done the work before. Now, all of a sudden, we're not going to see that solidarity happen. I think in general, Africans, we've always been together, but not in this magnitude. We didn't necessarily have the forum where we all are coming, like the African continent is coming together and know what all is happening in each country, what the issues are, and work towards the solution. That I don't know I'm not saying it never happened. I think it was there, but not to the degree that it was needed. But moving forward, I think what should happen really is the continent needs to come together. And I don't mean just politically. I think economically, socially, in so many different ways, the continent needs to come together, have the right people at the table, and talk about what is it that we have common as a continent. We're not going to be the same. Okay, Ethiopians are different from Nigerians. Nigerians are different from Uganda. I mean, we have such rich continent. Are we saying let's become the melting pot? No, we're not saying that. What we're saying is we could keep our uniqueness, but we better find those common places that we connect that makes us strong, whether it's boundaries, territories, policies, so many different ways, I think, in how we work with others, including the Western. I think moving forward, what needs to happen really is looking at our own foreign policies. And I know the Prime Minister talked about it even in his statement. He called it neighbor-oriented, because I know he believes in the notion of if my neighbor is okay, then I know I'm okay kind of thing. And it is true. Because before the far relative shows up to help you in your need, your neighbor is going to be there first because they're the closest. And I think that's the smartest thing to do. And I just can't wait until this war is over, whatever it is over, so that we can move on to the building.
In Asia, how do you analyze the economic impact of the US on Ethiopia and Eritrea? The sanctions, the economic sanction on both countries, Ethiopia and Eritrea.
I mean, I think right now it has a devastating impact because the timing. Okay, I think both countries and the continent itself is working its way out of that dependency, but we're not there yet. Is it going to continue like that? Probably not. If we continue this path and this journey, I think we will see Africa really come together and just step into that new era that we all want to see. But for right now, because we're not there yet and it's like midstream, yes, that economic impact is going to be really, really devastating. In saying this, should we then just sell our souls? No. I think dialogue needs to happen. I think the rest of the world needs to really look into what it is that's happening. If the world, including the current administration, cares about humanity and or humanitarian effort, which they really are a strong believer of that, taking away funding isn't punishing the government, they're punishing the poor. They're punishing the people that needs it right now. We're using it as a, I think, political talking point in saying, well, we can't even give any kind of humanitarian access because we can't get in there. You can't use that to step into somebody's world and actually covertly do some other stuff. I think the country is also trying to make sure that peace and protection happens for everyone. I believe when an administration makes a decision, there is a reason. That's not for me to really dismantle and figure out. But yes, it will have a devastating impact for both Ethiopia, Eritrea, and whoever else that they are trying to take away. I mean, if there was no need for them to give that funding, then they didn't have to, right? There was a need, they believed in it, and that's how come they were providing it. And without any recourse, without any kind of anything being a safety net, they're just taking the rug right underneath from people that actually need it. That is really, really not humanitarian at all.
What would be the role of Ethiopian diaspora in telling the world the real situation of this country?
I think, well, that really is a good question. I think the role of the diaspora, and sort of started a few years back, just needs to ramp up a little bit. We're here for a reason. There are so many professional Ethiopians or diaspora Africans in general that can contribute to the country. Okay, whether it's in the professional world, whether it's in the fiscal investment, in so many different ways. And since we're talking about the role of the diaspora, I think the role of the diaspora also has the obligation to do the same thing that we're saying the continent of Africa must do, which is coming together. The diaspora itself needs to find that common ground that makes us all together and agree on what it is that we can do and actually focus on that. And right now, what we're lately, especially lately, the whole nationalist movement is bringing us together, and we are willing to set aside our differences and saying, forget that for right now. We're going to focus on building Ethiopia. Every one of us, I think, I can speak for a lot of the diaspora. We are waiting for this thing to just be done, and then we can focus on the rebuilding. So many of us have lived here and spent our young age here. It's time to give back. It has been time. It's a long overdue. Coming together and saying, what can I do? Instead of asking, what is it that somebody can do for me? I think it's time for us to say, what can I do? I always say something when it comes to situations like this. I may not be able to change the world. I cannot change the world, but I can change the world of one. That's enough. It starts with just one. And not to underestimate the power of one. I think the diaspora has a great potential. And I really, really want to say with the Ethiopian Public Diplomacy Network, our vision is that, this isn't going to be a forever thing. This is going to be done. And when that is done, our next agenda and our next vision, long-term vision, really is rebuilding and sharing what we have gained, educating our own children, and passing on history and passing on the whole that Ethiopianness to the next generation, and encouraging the young generation back in Ethiopia and say, you are the next Ethiopia, you're it. And actually investing in people and investing in what is going to be a lasting solution, whether it's changing, or maybe, I don't want to say changing, but maybe doing something with the education system, looking at the policies that we have, the healthcare. So many of us are in so many different fields. If allowed, I think the diaspora has a lot of potential to contribute, not necessarily to show up there and say, we're all that and we're better. That's not what I'm saying. But I think if we could contribute what it is that we've been pouring here, I think there is something we all can do, and especially if we can bring it together and use it for something positive.
I'm almost done with all my questions, and in a nutshell, lastly, if you have a general message for the people and government of Ethiopia, over to you.
Wow, yeah. Right now, go get them. That's what I want to say. We're right here. We're very far, but we're very close. Physically, we're not there, but mentally, in our minds, in our thoughts, in our prayers, we're right there. Most of us are saying, I wish it was just that easy to get up and go. We would have been there, and we might just show up. We are in support. I can tell you from the work that we do, the diaspora here is in support of the work that is being done right now. We know we have a lot of work to do. We understand we gotta put our money where our mouth is. Ethiopia is gonna need a lot of support. There are some things that we're changing. Some of our practices, some of the things that we did that was detrimental to the country, we're making a conscious effort. And that's our commitment to Ethiopia. I think in the past, we've done some things because we thought we were helping, but we're literally having to think about it twice before we do anything. And what I want to say to the people right now is, even this shall come to pass. This will end, and Ethiopia needs to be first. Ethiopia needs to be first. Take it from us. I've lived here so many years. I lived here longer than I lived in Ethiopia. And if I can change that, I would. It's not easy. Don't take it lightly that you could say you have a country. Without a country, you could have the material stuff. You can have this and that, the others. But deep inside, when you know you're still a foreigner, you would appreciate to have a country. You could say, my country. So you have a country, we have a country, we have Ethiopia. Let's keep it that way. God bless Ethiopia.
Mamay Worku, Chairperson of Public Diplomacy in Oki in Denver, Colorado. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate it. Thanks for having me here.
Dear viewers, this will bring us to the end of this edition. I will come on the mobile hosting this program for you till the next edition. Have a beautiful time.